Hi everyone, this is Rooster Woodworking, and this week we are building a white oak dresser, experimenting with new materials and techniques, and I'll even share with you why this dresser is technically illegal. Stay tuned. If you've watched some of my videos in the past, you know that most projects start with a request from a customer or family member or friend. This build, however, started with, well, a sale. You see, sometimes last year I was minding my own business and browsing the aisle of my favorite hardware store when I found this piece of plywood. Obviously, as you can see, there are some defects on this sheet, and that's why it was marked as a blemish piece. And if you're anything like me, you get pretty excited when you hear the word blemish. Well, at least in the case of plywood, I guess. You see, this entire 4x8 sheet of 3/4 inch white oak plywood was $50. And finally, 6 months later, after sitting in storage, I found a use for it, and that is today's video. What I'm making today is a dresser for a very special customer since it's for my girlfriend. Because her current options as far as storing clothes are pretty limited, I offered to build her something that's bigger and more convenient than what she has now. And if you're thinking that maybe she has too many clothes, you are dead wrong. What I've done so far in this build is cut my plywood sheet to size for the cabinet part, and my white oak lumber to rough size for the frame, legs, and drawer fronts. The lumber that I selected for this project is flat sawn white oak. And because it is flat sawn, the grain pattern didn't really match the quarter sawn pattern that is on my plywood sheet. So I left my stock pretty thick so I could do the rip and flip method, which exposes quarter sawn grain on the side of the board. That's a great way that I found to get a flat sawn look without having to pay for it. And it ended up being a very nice match to the plywood. You don't really have to use hardwood edge banding for projects like this. You could very well use an iron-on or stick-on edge banding that is probably much cheaper. The only reason I'm using hardwood edge banding here is because I intend to cut a chamfer on the inside edge of the cabinet, and that wouldn't be possible with a thinner edge banding. Edging your plywood like this is a little bit more work because you typically need to flush this edge banding to the surface of the plywood afterwards. To bring the edge banding to the same thickness as the plywood, I typically use my palm router with an extra little fence attached to it. Now, this is nothing fancy, just a piece of scrap and some double-sided tape, but it does the trick very nicely. All you have to do is take your time and make sure that you're applying enough pressure on that piece of scrap. A little hand plane and card scraper work, and you get a perfectly flat and smooth surface. Something else I wanted to try on this build was to make my plywood box with miters as opposed to the usual butt joints. I'm cutting those miters with my track saw because my table saw is way too small to accommodate for such a big piece of plywood. I also added some dominoes for alignment, and then it was time for glue up, which, well, I didn't really film because it was very stressful. Miters do look great, but they're definitely more of a hassle to assemble. We're now moving on to what is probably the most boring part of this build, which is making the drawer boxes for this dresser. If you have watched my walnut bathroom vanity video, which, well, you definitely should, I'm using the same drawer system here. Those are undermount drawer slides from Rockler, and I think they're called the Centerline, and I've just had really good experiences with it. The trick is to measure everything as precisely as you can, and then sit for about 10 minutes and do a bunch of math. But if you respect all of that, and then cut accurately, you'll get a perfect fit every time. And yeah, that's a lot of ifs and math for me too, but you'll make it work. Those are very basic drawer boxes, except you have to cut notches and holes in the back to accommodate for the sliders. I'm also adding a groove in each part for the bottom panel. Just like that, not too snug, not too loose. Now, you might call me basic, which would be fair, but the way I like to build my drawer boxes now is just with dominoes. It's definitely not because I feel guilty of spending so much money on a tool and I feel like I have to use it every single project. But it's also because it makes assembly easy, quick, accurate, and also I hate doing joinery on drawers. As I said before, you need to do a little bit of math to make sure that your undermount drawer slides will work perfectly. What I'll typically do is dry assemble the drawer before gluing it, and then making sure that it slides perfectly into the opening. Which, in this case, it did. And that was a great feeling. I also took the time to pre-finish all my drawer parts so I wouldn't have to deal with that after gluing up. And then it was time for glue up. Once the drawer boxes were assembled, I moved on to building the drawer faces, and these are very important since they're going to be the focal point of the whole design. After cutting all my thick stock to width, I resawed all the boards to get the right thickness for the drawer fronts. I've always been fairly intimidated by resawing, but lately have been doing more of it and I came to really enjoy it. It just feels pretty freeing to not be limited by the thickness of the stock that you purchase. The design for the drawer faces is very simple, just a normal railing style frame with an inset panel. I'm using dominoes here again to assemble the frame, and that day the woodworking gods were on my side since I had exactly the right amount of dominoes. If you're still watching this video, I want to thank you for making it that far. And if you're enjoying that type of content, I would greatly appreciate if you could subscribe to my channel. It really helps in promoting the channel and sharing the content to more people and building community over time. Now, this part of the build is going to get pretty experimental. See, I said that the drawer front would be the focal point of the design, but you also saw me build a very boring frame for it. So it's time to talk a little bit more about the actually interesting part of this whole build. My goal here is to use the fabric that you just saw me cut as a veneer for the panel that will go in the drawer front. But to do that, I needed to find an adhesive that would stick the fabric to the backer without ruining the fabric completely. So I went on my way and experimented with both plywood and MDF with different type of glue. I tried PVA glue, urethane glue, epoxy, contact cement, very stinky by the way, and even regular old spray adhesive. Alright, here we are. So I have the results from all the different tests that I've done. Let's see what will work, or not. Now look, did I record a long-winded video explaining the result of every single test that I tried? Sure. But I will spare you that and go straight to the results. The best adhesive was the spray adhesive from 3M, so that's what we're going with. Before cutting my panels to size, I needed to create a rabbet in the back side of the drawer front. I could have created a rabbet beforehand on the rails with a table saw, but it would have been more annoying to do on the stiles since I needed to stop and start my cut before the end of the piece. So I'm just using a rabbeting bit here and making sure that I secure my piece to the workbench with some double-sided tape to avoid slipping. In addition to being absolutely massive, this bit creates a lot of dust since it removes a lot of material. So thinking about dust collection in those cases is always a good idea. Those bits also leave a round corner, so there's a little bit of extra cleanup needed afterwards. Once my drawer front panels were cut to size, it was time to bring my fanciest pair of fabric scissors out and make my best impression of a Joann's employee. Rest in peace, Joann's. In the end, I'm really grateful that spray adhesive was the best option for this project. It's really easy to apply, you just have to spray it on top of one surface and then apply your fabric and roll it. A little bit of flush cutting with a utility knife and you're all ready to go. I mean, look how good that looks. It's hard to tell in the video, but I got very excited at this point of the build because it really seemed like everything was coming together and close to reaching the end. It looks fairly quick in the video, but this project altogether took me about 3 months to finish. Part of that is because I had other side projects come through in the meantime, but the main reason it took me so long is because since it's not for a client, I had all the design freedom in the world, and I just couldn't make a decision. For example, just for this drawer front, I went through 4 or 5 design iterations before landing on this very simple design. And that was mostly because I wanted the fabric to shine and not necessarily anything ornamental on the drawer front. That just goes to show that sometimes to get to the finish line, you have to take way longer than you thought. And yeah, finish line, you get it because I'm finishing the... never mind. At this point in the build, it was finally time to install the drawer slides and see everything come together. Now, there's about 1 million videos on YouTube that show you how to install those drawer slides, so I won't bore you with the details. What I like to do is cut support spacers, clamp everything in place, and then make sure that my offset is consistent with the front. And I've never had an issue with this method before. If you're wondering why I'm about to play with those drawers for way too long, it's because I used to struggle with installing drawers with hardware like this. So now that I'm more proficient at it, I get to really enjoy this part. Anyways, after this, I installed the drawer faces by using some spacers, clamping my drawer face into place, and then screwing it from the back. Then it was time to tackle the last part of this build, which was the base. And if you think that I had too many design iterations for the drawer fronts, oh, you haven't seen my notebook for the base. I went through about 10 designs for the base, and I just couldn't make a decision. I even tried showing my girlfriend because it's her dresser after all, but she's so supportive that she just liked them all. That's so annoying, right? So in the end, I decided to take a risk. See, I don't have a lot of experience with building fancy furniture with flowing curves because that's something that I'm fairly intimidated about. I always feel like I'm going to make it look very awkward or too thin or unbalanced, and the final result is going to be terrible. But on this build, I finally decided to try it out. I started by drawing out a rough shape of the feet and then moved on to the base. I used a very thin offcut and some clamps to make sure that the curve was continuous. Then I did my best to cut this curve on the bandsaw. I'm still fairly new at using the bandsaw, so that was really good practice, but also pretty nerve-wracking. I then refined the shape with a card scraper, but that made me think that I probably need to buy a spoke shave, right? Right? I also redrew the curves on the feet to make sure that they flow nicely with the base. Once everything looked alright, I marked for dominoes. Yes, I know. Once again, you could use dowels or even pocket screws for this. I just need a reason to use my domino. I also made sure to mark the angle of the long stretchers onto the shorter stretchers so everything would flow together nicely. Just like that. I also added a curve to the shoulder stretchers, and I did buy a spoke shave, but it was absolutely terrible, so if anyone has a recommendation for a good spoke shave, please leave that in a comment. How am I going to join those together, you ask? Well, of course, I'm going to use my pocket hole jig. I know, I'm sorry, that was a bit of a curveball. That was the best solution for me when dealing with curved parts that would not make the domino easy to use. And because it's going to be under the cabinet, no one's really going to see it. I really wanted the base to look soft and flowy, so I decided to use a pretty decent roundover on all the parts. And once it was all together, I think it looked really great. To attach the base to the cabinet, I'm using those figure 8 fasteners that allow for some wood movement, even though it shouldn't really be a problem because the cabinet is plywood. But better safe than sorry, I guess. To get an idea of what the dresser would look like, I temporarily attached the base before finishing it. I also played around with different offsets until I found something that I liked. There's still one thing that we need to do before wrapping this project up. See, when I was installing the drawer fronts, I realized that they didn't have handles. So instead of buying some like every normal person would do, I decided to design and make my own. But not to worry, I hired my newest shop employee to make the handles, but that's the topic of another video. At the start of this video, I mentioned that this dresser might be illegal, and because we're reaching the end of the build, I'm wondering, what do you think that is? If you think you've guessed already what could make this build illegal, please leave your guess in the comments. I'd be curious to see what you come up with. To install the handles, I built a quick jig that fit perfectly into my frame, and then I marked the center line and the width of the handle to pre-drill everything. Making a single-use jig like this for only 3 handles can seem like a waste of time and materials, but for me, it saves me so much headache down the line that I think it's well worth it. And with that last step, the dresser was finally fully done. So, why is it illegal? Well, if you look at any run-of-the-mill dressers like this IKEA one, you'll notice that the drawers do not extend all the way. There's about a third left at the back of the drawer. And this is by design because of tipping hazards, mainly for children. So, is my dresser illegal? I don't know. You tell me. All I know is that it looks pretty darn good. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.